to order today, Monday, June 27th. We'll start with introductions. I'm Victoria Jetty.
Carl Wilson.
Mary Heather Noble.
Brian Bauer.
Jen Newcedar.
Caitlyn Steele, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning.
Bruce McIntyre, Director of Facilities.
Logan Price, Business Manager.
And on Zoom, we've got Chip
Chip Malcolm.
and
Patch, Technology Director.
Steve.
Steve Warzak.
Great. Thank you very much.
Lindsay Hescock, you see me, I'm here too.
Oh, there you are. Okay, I don't know why I can't see you. I mean, I see you not the big
now.
Great.
I'm like giant. What do you
Yeah.
mean? How do you make me not giant?
You were giant. You were like in the room with us. There you go. Okay.
Sorry, I'm not there. I got my hand up on 3 pillows and ice at this point after surgery. So.
Oh. Hope you feel better.
It's okay right now. It's like a huge club and totally numb.
Oh.
Whatever.
Thanks. Great. Well, thanks for being here. As always, we'll open it up to public comment first to those in the room, and then if you're on Zoom and interested in making a public comment, please raise your Zoom hand, and I will call on you. As a reminder, we're trying to keep public comment to 3 minutes. Is there anyone in the room? You.
Bruce, did I leave a sheet over there with you? I don't think I did, with all the numbers on it. Okay.
This one?
No, there's a one from the annual report. It's big one. It's in the room, but I'll start. Hi, I'm Hugh McLaughlin. I'm a retired high school math teacher and a substitute at MUHS. What I'd like to do is make a pitch on what we use for our goal to measure how the recovery is going. On page 22 of the 2021-22 strategic plan report, which was included in the handouts for the last meeting where I found it, is a page of numbers showing test scores for 2019 and 2021. And there, to even simplify the numbers, there are 4 categories of proficiency. And if you look at the second page of the measuring the impact of social factors, which was sent out at 5:30 is the latest, it shows that those categories are proficient with distinction, proficient, partially proficient, and substantially below. So the current system basically divides it into 2 groups. You're either proficient and above or below, and they report the above numbers. But what we're looking for in the recovery when we look at the data is that the real problem is in this bottom category, okay? And so what I'm proposing and going to think is that we change it so that the group of those that are not in the lowest group are considered in the upper group. Because to do statistical tests, we have to look at everybody. We just can't pick out one category and compare there for percentages. So with that, what that allows us to do is to do pairwise comparisons. So we can look at, and I'll bring it back to a page that I've handed out to people here. The data that you saw in the annual report is similar to what's not in the boxes, okay? But instead of looking at the top 2, I focused this one on the bottom 1, okay? Does that make sense? So you get a slightly different look at the same data, but it's focusing on the levels in particular of what's happening to our most distressed students, okay? And the point I want to make here is if we look at those 2 pentagons over here in math, you know I'm a math teacher. So there are 2 pentagons around on this sheet right here, which says in the upper left, substantially below proficient. So that's what we're measuring. It shows that for the ACSD, the gap was 32.8%. The gap for the state of Vermont, which is not as economically well-being overall as we are in the percentage of students, was smaller. That is a distressing fact to me. I'm sorry. I have worked in Lawrence, I have worked at Chelsea, and both school districts are now not under state supervision. But I was there when we had to get them out, and that's what we focused on. So that's bringing my Massachusetts things there together for you. So looking at how we can compare things, we can compare free and reduced lunch, which is that FRL, the math, and the median, which is we have 7 different observations down here. And how do I describe it in one number? You know what I mean? That's hard. So I took the median, 5-number summary, minimum, maximum, first quartile, and third quartile on that. So this one here, that median is, yes, it's between 12.4 and 44.7, which are the smallest and the biggest. But if you're looking for one number and you don't like to live in numbers, Caitlyn's laughing now because she knows that I live for the numbers. And we'll leave it there on that. You can look at free and reduced lunch in the third grade of ELL.
Just a warning.
Yep, 1 minute. Oh, I'm out of time? Well, I'll take my last one. If you look up here at the front, at the 2 hash marks, the dotted ones are the data for the ACSD, and the other one is for Vermont. And once again, you can look at how we did on an individual exam compared to the whole universe of people there. So that's what I'm here to argue for when you look at the judging how well we're doing on the recovery program there. Thank you so much for your time. And if you have any questions, those of you who know how I answer email, will know that you want to send it to mclmathtutor.com because the other one has 25,000 items.
Thank you very much. And just for board members' information, that some of the work that Hugh shared with me, I shared with you. If you want to get a deeper dive into sort of the interesting analysis that he has done just with the numbers that the state provides. All right. Do we have anyone on Zoom? No. Okay, we will move on to get a recommendation to approve the minutes of June 13th. Thank you.
I'll make a motion. I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
So, whatever the word.
And a second. Someone?
I'll do it.
Thank you. All right, are there any questions, comments on the minutes of June 13th?
Victoria,
Yes.
I just want to compliment the minute taker again. There were some sensitive areas there, which I thought she captured very well. And I think it's good to have these kind of detailed minutes on those kinds of issues. Thank you.
And Steve?
I would have one correction on when we talk about boots on the ground. Brian's getting that left out, right? It's there, so.
Yeah.
Yes.
So he's saying that Brian was.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I've already corrected those because that was a detail that Victoria also pointed out to me. So thank you.
Any other questions or comments on the minutes? All right, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Jen Newseder abstains. All right. Bills. Chip, are you feeling up to it, or is Barb?
I don't have the Barb was.
Okay.
I
Yeah, I
talked to
can
Barb
go.
earlier.
Okay, so we had quite an assortment of things to look at today, to say the least. 6 payroll, different ledgers, as well as the general fund and the Gilton fund. So the general fund was $480,455.24. Then the Gilton fund was $20,640, and most of that was to the Kiwanis Foundation. I think it was a field trip and town hall theater. And then we had payroll, and the reason it was broken down in so many different pieces is a reflection of the year end and how teachers get their pay as well as spread across the year. So they can combine them all, as well as coaches and leaders and mentors. So the first one, the largest one, was just payroll for teacher salaries, was $2,532,837.27. We had another payroll that was $3,552.75. We had hourly subs payroll, $342,003.86. Another payroll, coaches, leaders, mentors, was $168,055.91. Another payroll for $250.16. And the final payroll was $7,922.32. Phew, yes, a mouthful.
Great.
And if I can pass this on. So I make a motion that we approve the bills.
I second that.
Great, Chip is a second.
Can I make one comment that Barb, sorry.
Yes,
Go ahead.
yep,
Didn't mention, Barb, but that $2,500,000 is to cover the entire summer, so.
Yes, yes.
Because some folks take it before and some folks take it along the way, so that was why that was such a big number.
thank you. Any other questions or comments for Chip and Barb? For the finance committee? Okay, all those in favor of approving the bills as stated, please say aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, the bills can be paid. On to professional appointments. I assume you all saw the list in the board pack. So if I can get a motion to approve the professional appointments as stated. Mary Heather, in a second.
Second.
Brian, questions, comments? Not that I can answer them, but Caitlyn might be able to. No. Okay. All those in favor of approving the professional appointments as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. On to you, Caitlyn Steele, report of the superintendent.
Thanks. So the report today is just an update, really for your information about our education recovery plan, also referred to as our COVID recovery plan. This was submitted to the state by the deadline of June 1st and has already been approved by the AOE, but it's a nice update on sort of the state of our work. So Victoria sent a message out last week saying, heads up, this is a really long document, but really you don't need to check in until page 17. You've seen phases 1 and 2 before. So it's really just phase 3 that's new. So the original application, phase 1, I'll just walk you through the highlights of it. And if any questions, please interrupt me at any time. So the original application was phase 1. We submitted it last year in April of 2021. That was our initial needs assessment. So that was when we believed we were coming out of COVID and we were writing our plan for recovery. And so we were basically asking, what needs do we see as we're coming out of the pandemic? We needed to anchor our observations to data and really root them in stakeholder engagement. And so that first page of the whole report shows you who did we talk to and how did we collect information for this in terms of stakeholder engagement. And then the needs assessment, let me back up a little bit and say, this is an agency of education template. And so we follow the patterns that they require us to follow. So they required us to look at particular categories. SEL and mental health and well-being is one of them. Engagement/truancy is another. Academic achievement is another. So we categorized our needs that way. That was phase 1. We submitted that in April. We used that needs assessment to write phase 2, which was our recovery planning and implementation plan. So that we submitted to the state last year in May. It was approved in June, and this board has seen that. So that said, what do we mean to do to address these needs? And we use that plan, phases 1 and 2, to inform our ESSER 2 application. This is phase 3. So phase 3 is what we submitted this spring. This is the only new information. It was the evaluation and refinement of the plan. I have not been told that we are to expect any phase 4. I think that this is the end of this plan. So basically, phase 3 was an opportunity to reflect and speak out about what we did do this past year, how it went, and where we think we're going next. That's the premise of this. And so I've just printed it starting at page 17. You basically read the story across each column to see what did we do in each of these categories. So our first category was social emotional learning, SEL. And you'll see if you've read through it or skimmed it, that we didn't get to the place where we were actually implementing an SEL screener. We have a literacy screener and a math screener, and we meant this year to be rolling out an SEL screener. And we just didn't successfully lift that. So that's a big change for next year. We need to hit the ground running. And in September, the plan is to roll out an SEL screener with our math and literacy ones. You may have heard that our SEL coordinator is not returning to us next year. She's going back to the classroom in another district, which is sad because she was phenomenal, and also wonderful that she's going into the classroom. We chose not to repost that position. We chose not to because the big concern was that we would attract a classroom teacher out of the classroom into a coordinator position. And we were afraid we wouldn't fill all of our classroom teacher positions and need to reassign that person back to the classroom. So we've decided instead of holding a position to run SEL, we're going to really lean into a distributed leadership model for next year. So this summer, I'm collaborating with a colleague who's working on an administrative license, doing an internship to think about how will we build the structure where we can hand the leadership off to the school counselors and principals to carry that work. That's SEL. If you look at the next row on page 18 of the report.
Can I just ask a quick question?
Yes.
On that one? So when you say an SEL screener, is that like a paper and pen or computer-based test that the kids take in one of their classes, or how does that work?
It's an assessment, right? It's like a literacy or math assessment, but it really comes in the form of a survey where students grades 3 and up self-report on their sort of, I wish I was remembering all of the words. It's basically their SEL skills and competencies and general well-being. So it's through Panorama Ed. That's the same organization that did the climate surveys that we ran this spring. So it's research-based and vetted. For the younger kids, K2, it's actually just a much shorter survey that teachers report out for them. And it's computer-based, it's not paper-based. Other questions on that?
Yeah, so we had a person doing that you said was wonderful. Besides doing, the screening and I guess interpreting the data, what else did they do that we're expecting now to have this team effort do?
Right. So,
Sorry.
we hired a coordinator position largely to help us build systems. What we found was we weren't, I said sort of tongue in cheek that this was our recovery plan as we came out of the pandemic. We were very much still in the pandemic when the school year started and responding to crises. And so, in fact, Shauna, the SEL coordinator, spent a lot of time in schools working directly with students and directly with teachers. She did a lot of on the ground work and less of the systems building work because she was just responding to immediate needs. So we won't have that person in that role next year responding to those immediate needs. We have increased our school counselor FTE using ESSER funds. we are in the process of hiring another school prevention specialist, much like we did for Shoreham this year. So we're just looking at other ways that we can increase supports and services to students while also doing this systems building work behind the scenes.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. All right, I'll try to be less verbose on these other ones. For mental health, I just mentioned some of the things that we're doing for mental health going into next year. And you'll see there's sort of a theme in these, a reflection about needing more coherent data systems to make more data-driven decisions about how we share our resources across our 9 schools. And that's one of the themes in this row. I didn't grab any notes to reflect on well-being on page 19, so I'll skip ahead. If you look at page 20, this row on pre-K, on engagement, these goals were really about increasing summer and after-school programming. We really struggled with that. We didn't have a person to lead the charge, and it's really complicated when you're looking at the intersection of school-based and childcare. It's 2 different sets of regulations and just a lot of moving parts. So we struggled with that last year. Our current concept, supported by ARP-ESSER, the ARP-ESSER public plan, is to hire a coordinator to help us conduct a needs assessment and design a viable way forward. One of the major struggles is really providing equitable services across our smaller schools, where it's hard to get enough students to enroll consistently to justify or to sustain staffing those programs. So the job is posted, the coordinator job. It's only a 2-year position because it's ARP-ESSER. We will later this summer try to interview some people. And I think importantly, we really need to continue to partner with Mary Johnson Children's Center, who already offer some of these services. So I'm in conversation with Kristen Dunn, their director there, to think about how we can move forward in a coherent way with that work.
And then in the addendum to this, you listed where there are summer programs, and it looks like most of our small schools are planning this summer, I think with the exception of Weybridge, and then Mary Hogan was not. Were those just pilot, they were hoping to, or are those actually?
So those are running this year, and they're running with a little bit of ESSER funding. They are, as I mentioned, we didn't have a centralized position to organize something consistently district-wide. So where principals and their faculty have taken the lead on building programs, that's where those programs are running. And we were able to compensate educators and buy some supplies with ESSER funds. That's
And were they open to other towns?
So there were 2 places that specifically partnered. So Weybridge didn't offer a program, so students there were invited to go to Salisbury. They're not open universally to everybody, so they're open based on data. And what happens is that the schools create a data set to say these are the qualifications to be prioritized for access to this program. And if you hit these qualifications, it could be lower literacy scores or, various, then we have to invite you. And if we invite you and you can't make it because of transportation, well, that's an access issue and we need to solve transportation. So Logan's been helping solve transportation for some people for whom that would be a barrier. So it's a little bit scattershot still. It's sort of some of the vestigial features of a supervisory union as opposed to a district approach. Other questions on that?
Yeah, I guess, I don't know if it's a question or a comment, but I found it concerning that our largest student population didn't have access, our largest elementary student population didn't appear to have access to that. And that just seemed concerning, and I'm just wondering.
So what's interesting is, what I didn't list there is that Mary Johnson Children's Center does run a summer program at Mary Hogan. It's not run by the school system. It's the only school where they have a program. And so in some ways they have had for a long time access to summer programming that our outlying schools haven't had. Yeah.
So when they run the program, do we as a district evaluate it in any way, or?
No, when Mary Johnson runs a program, so that was the thing that was one of the things that was so complicated last year. We tried to partner with them and push more supplemental instruction and programming into the Mary Johnson program. Managing the two different types of regulations without direct oversight over the program was just more than we had the capacity to handle. And so we stopped doing that partnership. Mary Johnson continues to run their own program. They use our site. Logan, do they use other resources that are district-based? Do they use our food system?
Yes, they do, yeah.
But it's their program.
Right. And if there was students at Mary Hogan that really needed to have the more instructional summer program, would they then be able to go to Salisbury, or were they invited to go to another school?
So those students who are identified for extended school year, which is I wish that Nicole's not here, she can
Okay.
speak to that more
Right.
fluently. That is accessible to students at all of our schools. So if they qualify through special education for extended school year services, that's not represented in this chart, and it is universally available to those students.
Thank you.
Yeah. We had some good success with our pre-K coordinator, pre-K/kindergarten transition coordinator. In terms of, we only have 2 school-based programs for preschool, one at Mary Hogan and one at Bridport. They were really different programs. Going into next year, they're much more aligned in terms of time with students, staffing model, enrollment system. So many things are more consistent. The attention to professional learning for our early childhood educators is more robust. So that's been great. We have not gotten to the place where we really have a vision for what are we trying to do for preschool district-wide. And so you'll see a nod to a need to pick that work up in the coming year. Any questions, or shall I press on? Great. Let's see. So what did I want to tell you about page 22? Page 22, you'll see we didn't, we have had a lot of support for our teachers in terms of IB implementation for next year. That those collaborative teams that have been building our curriculum together for several years now will be focused on reflecting on their curriculum through the lens of universal design for learning to really maximize access and success for students. So that curriculum collaboration will continue, but it's sort of a 2.0 version where we're not drafting curriculum from scratch. We're really revising to make sure that we're providing as many opportunities for access and engagement as possible. And you'll see a note there that because of greater than usual staff turnover rates, we're going to need to renew our focus on collaborative structures and collaborative practices, which is something we've done a lot of training and practice in years past. We have a small team of educators right now working on designing and proposing a new induction model. So expanding our new teacher orientation, which is a single day, and mentoring, which is a long-standing but really simple, minimally funded mentoring program, into a 1 or 2 year induction model. That little team of educators will be sharing a proposal with us later this week, and we'll be looking for grant funding to support that, to support the onboarding of so many new teachers for next year. So I had noted in here that I think as we review our ARP-ESSER, our public plan for ARP-ESSER spending, I can anticipate that rising as a need because there's been so much input that we need to do better to support our teachers. So I think we plan to crack open that ARP-ESSER plan late summer or early fall. So anticipate seeing some updates along those lines. Let's see. Throughout this, you'll see notes about needs. So I'm looking at page 24 under System of Services. This is sort of a note of a type under new or modified change ideas. It says the plan is to improve data collection systems to better understand the mechanisms that result in the number. So, Hugh has graciously taken a lot of time to help explain to me how he's looking at at the SBAC data. And I really appreciate that. It's one of many places where we really need to have a more robust approach to understanding the data we have at our fingertips and exploring what it might mean for our students, for our schools, for our systems of support. So this is a theme that comes up over and over again in this report. I'm not sure that we see the way forward with that yet. We don't have a person who's tasked with data systems at the district level. You see the reports that I produce where I do the best I can with the capacity and skills I have, but it's just really not deep enough. So I think that that's another place that you can expect to see some suggestions in our update to the ARP-ESSER spending plan. And of course, those ARP-ESSER funds are temporary, and so we'll want to design for something that we can sustain over time. Go ahead.
So with respect to data management, and I imagine, obviously we're not the only school district having to go through like a COVID recovery and data-driven decision-making on where to spend the money and how to allocate resources. Are there expectations, like what are the sort of data management expectations from AOE or the state with respect, because I would think that would kind of drive, it seems like what we have is kind of a hodgepodge.
Yeah.
Right? And we want to have some consistency so that we're able to report efficiently across all of our schools. And I'm just wondering, is this something that AOE is specifically supporting or the funds are supporting? And what are other districts? We can't be the only ones struggling with this, so what are others doing?
We're definitely not the only ones struggling. So the AOE has been hosting these weekly coffee and conversations meetings where they're sort of rolling out all of the COVID updates and ESSER updates all year long and helping us think and showing us how they're changing the continuous improvement plans to streamline them because there's so many other plans required of us now. So at one of those late in the year, they raised, for the first time that I heard it, the idea that we should have a centralized data system that speaks to this thing that they haven't yet adopted.
Oh.
I would say that that my impression is that data is not a strength in Vermont. Hugh was talking about how long it takes for us to get our fully cleaned and unembargoed SBAC scores and how problematic that is for informing real-time instructional decisions. Now, we can see internally how our students did, but we can't release the school level or state level results until the state unembargoes them. And this year it was spring from last year. So, there are definitely districts that are ahead of us in terms of having a centralized data system and dashboards where they can call up information pretty quickly. I think that that's probably a next step for us. And when we make that step, we need to make sure that it works well with PowerSchool, which is sort of our hub of data, our student information system, and with any reporting that will be required of the state. So we'll need to make that decision carefully. The ideal would be that I think the ideal would be that we have a single dashboard that does both of those things, but that collects the data from FastBridge, our elementary math and literacy screeners, STAR 360, our secondary math and literacy screeners, Toddle, our elementary learning management system, ManageBack, our secondary, Panorama, our SEL screeners. I could go on for all of these different ways that we have organically over time determined that this is the tool whereby we will collect or create this data. And they're all separate platforms. And so it's pretty unwieldy to make meaning out of data in that way. There are data systems that will pair with those and glean it and report it all out in lovely dashboards. It's not a small task to onboard something like that, to build the system that will speak lucidly to us as educators, and then to have our schools consistently using those tools in the same way so that our data means something across buildings. It's a big lift. Yeah, Barb.
You mentioned that there is probably other schools that are further ahead.
Yeah.
Is there a way to partner with them and learn from them?
Yeah.
it's so much easier starting halfway down the field as opposed to at the zero, line or whatever.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, so I don't have it called up right now and I won't go digging for it, but I've started a little chart of different potential platforms and, what we see as the strengths and limitations. For instance, we won't adopt anything that won't work with PowerSchool because it will be roadblocks all along the way for us. So there are things like that. And we have, regional curriculum directors like me who have these sorts of conversations. So as I have found new platforms, I've sort of shot questions out to the group to say, who's using this one? Any reviews? So we're really just in the beginning stages of vetting different models, but we certainly would want to use something that's been embraced and endorsed by partner districts.
For sure.
Yeah. Any other questions on that? There were all sorts of appendices in this for updates on various things. The professional development sort of speaks to itself, but the staffing and the summer program we already talked about. The staffing, which starts on page 30, notice that was current as of May 31st. This report was due to the state on June 1st. So I did want to give you a little bit of an update about where staffing stands. I didn't produce another table, but I do have some updates. And you've seen the official assignments but there are other things that are in the works. So for instance, we've been hiring a ton. We've been doing a ton of interviewing all spring and it continues. I had a final interview. I stood in for Peter for a final interview today and have a verbal acceptance of a contract, so we need to get that on paper. But as that stands, it looks like unofficially, but imminently, Shoreham will be fully staffed for the fall, which is very exciting. Mary Hogan, it shows that they're missing a classroom teacher in this report. They are not. They are fully staffed for classroom teachers. We have interventionists. Again, some of these aren't signed contracts, but they're well in the works for hiring for both mums and the high school. So for the first time in all the time I've been here, and probably much longer, we'll have a math and a literacy interventionist at the high school, which is exciting. We have an open assistant principal position at mums. Karen accepted a job elsewhere, and so that position has been posted and is being hired. We have a world language teacher at mums. I don't think that that's new news, but we had an opening at the high school for next year for a teacher who's going on leave. We have a lead there. We don't have an answer, right? So there are a lot of things that are really well underway. There are places where we've got gaps. So we've got gaps in special educators. Yeah, Brian, did you have a question?
I do. Under staffing, are the interviews done with personnel leaving available to the board to review?
The exit interviews?
Exit interviews, yes.
It's not a question that I can answer. Exit interviews are something that Peter has been conducting. So when he is back, I would suggest that you ask him that question. I have seen many exit interviews come and go from his office. I have not debriefed any of them with him at this point. So we're short on special educators. I'm not able to quote the exact number for you. Under Act 173, which we've been talking about a lot, starting on July 1st, so starting this week, we have more flexibility about who can provide special education services based on a student's plan. So it doesn't necessarily have to be a licensed special educator. So one strategy that we've taken is, with a lack of applicants for special education positions, we've posted academic interventionist positions. We have more applicants for those, and we have interviews underway for those positions. So it's a different way to get a full-time, fully licensed teacher working with students without the special education endorsement. So solutions like that are how we're trying to work the problem. We're short on on para-educators. This is problematic across the board. It's incredibly problematic in the case where we have one-on-one para positions that are within a student's IEP, and so therefore we're legally obligated to provide those. So we've incentivized that. Logan, do you know if that's formalized as a side letter or if that's just in the works? I think it's been published that we've increased the pay.
I announced it during a radio interview, so let's hope it's.
So we've increased the pay for those positions by $4 an hour. And that is true for those people already filling those positions too,
Yeah,
right?
it was $1, now it's $4.
Now it's $4. So the hope is that we will, with significantly increased pay, attract more people to those positions. And this one is fun. We did hire a multilingual community liaison, which is an ESSER investment. It's Fernanda Nales, who is rejoining us halftime as our multilingual community liaison. She and we are very excited about that. I think that those are the big updates. Any questions on that?
So in terms of is it 170?
Act 173?
173, is that they're allowing for these non-special ed certified because of the staffing shortage or just because?
No, it's just uncanny good luck.
Oh.
So the reason that they're allowing for more flexibility is the premise is that we have the staff in the faculty in the building or staff in the building with the skills that are best matched to the students' learning needs, delivering those services. And so that may be a special educator, it may be a math teacher, it may be a literacy teacher, it may be a paraprofessional who has really targeted skills. So now, I mean, that's a lovely logical change in the law. That it goes into effect this July. The more onerous things, like the funding structures, that's what they gave us a pause on till next July. So the teeth in the law are coming into play a year from now, but that leniency in the law in terms of directing services beyond just special educators goes into effect this year. So it's actually really good luck that extra flexibility that was always designed into the law is allowing us to hire more flexibly this year when we've got real need to hire. It's just good. It's just great.
I have a couple of questions. I guess one thing is just to follow up on this special education conversation, and I just want to confirm, because I think those of us who have worked in kind of either with our kids, just in that special education world, there's kind of this like tendency to flinch, like I just want to confirm that the difficulty in hiring special educators is not going to just heap more work into the backpacks of our classroom teachers, that in fact this flexibility is going to allow the district to hire full-time individuals to do this work. They may not be certified special educators, but I just want to make clear that we're not just sloughing that work onto.
That is definitely our intent in posting academic intervention positions, is to hire full-time employees to fill those positions. Absolutely. We are going to see a reorganization of who carries what work and how with Act 173. This extra year of flexibility before it has the teeth is really a gift to us. I think somewhere in this report we wrote about that we'll be doing a deep dive in professional learning next year in the area of response to intervention, which is about using evidence-based interventions as part of our multi-tiered systems of support. And the people we're training are our principals, our coordinators, and our interventionists. And the reason that it's those groups is the principals have that sort of decision-making authority at the building level, so they can make decisions about how to reorganize roles. Our coordinators, they're the ones who support our teachers in collaboration. And so we want them in on the ground floor of designing the system so they understand how this will and will not impact teachers and can translate that back to their collaboration. But our interventionists also, because we anticipate that how we do intervention is going to change in the years to come. And rather than have it be change that happens to our interventionists, we're inviting them into being the lead learners with our decision makers so that they can help build those systems. So we don't know all of the change that's coming our way. We're trying to be really thoughtful about who we include in learning about the change and designing the new systems.
And my second question has to do with kind of back to the phase 3 plan. And, you know, obviously, it's very focused on these key student indicators. And one of the things that jumped out, and this may or may not be a question that you can answer, so maybe it's just an observation, but one of the things that jumped out at me is obviously some of our challenges in addressing the to-do lists in our key student indicator categories are difficult because of our staff turnover and our staff, all the pressures on our staff. And I'm just wondering to what extent our recovery plan can consider or accommodate staff indicators. Meaning, is some of our response, or can some of our response kind of address that staff turnover question, that staff fatigue question? Because it seems to me that some of the challenges are not just things that we just throw money at or hire and think, but how are we caring for the folks who are right here, right now? And I'm just wondering if there's flexibility in the phase 3 plan to think about that or make adjustments for that. And I don't know if there is or isn't, but I mean, I know you're kind of, the recovery plan is based on an AOE kind of template, so I don't even know if you have that flexibility. I'm just kind of making the observation that it seems like a lot of the challenges we have in addressing SEL or, you know, are grounded in this staff turnover question.
So I'm trying to think about where that's addressed in here. In the SEL row, we note that this year we did do those Panorama school culture and climate surveys.
Yeah.
We surveyed students and faculty and staff alike. In May, when people were really tired, those were pretty depressing results.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So we looked at those with our administrative team. That was hard. We plan to administer that survey again in September. Certainly we hope that people are getting the rest that they need, getting, you know, some taking care of themselves a little bit. And then we're also being really thoughtful in what we design in terms of welcoming people back during pre-week and really leaning into next year our collaboration at the elementary level on responsive classroom and at the secondary or at the high school level on restorative practices, which are both of those are very focused not only on sort of student behavior, but at the foundation on school community and connection and colleagueship to set the tone for our students. And so we're really focused on community building. We're hoping people come back rested. We're hoping that we welcome them well. We're hoping that we start the year feeling better, and we're planning to implement that survey again, which will give us at least 2 sets of data to have a sense of how our faculty is really doing and staff. So that's one place that we addressed it. And then I also mentioned that we do have this team, really enthusiastic team working on designing a new induction model. That's not funded through ESSER. It's funded this year through Title II, the initial kickoff, but I think you should expect to see us come and ask to use some of our ARP ESSER spending to fund what they propose going forward. And then think about if it's really valuable in terms of helping people to feel connected to a professional community and supported in their first year or 2 here, how can we sustain that over time? Can we build it into a local budget? So those will be questions we'll need to explore over time. I don't think that answers all of your question.
No,
but
it's helpful to know that you're thinking about this. I guess I just want to kind of plant that seed that it seems like an important component of this bigger, broader picture with student recovery. I mean, it's kind of like that, you know, the kids are okay if the parents are okay kind of mindset, and if the teachers are not okay, the kids are not okay. So
it
that's
matters
the
an
reason
awful
for my
lot.
ask. Thank you.
I think that in order to address what Heather has brought up, those exit interviews are very important so that the board can see what people have said and then how the central office has dealt with it. And that's why I brought it up.
Thank you. I'll make note and pass that on to Peter.
Thank you.
Yep, Peter knows that we're anticipating his download.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And besides maybe doing the survey in the beginning of the year, possibly there needs to be other feelers and barometers that you're using. It would be so much easier to catch if we know something isn't working. Instead of waiting until we have a mass exodus, it's much better to kind of come back and say, okay, how can we do this better? So having more informal maybe data points, just to make sure that things are doing what we think and improving the way we are hoping.
Yep, I agree with you. I think that one of the things that we struggle with is how to report out on that. So,
Sure.
you know, we, in some of our more struggling schools, we as central office administrators really pushed in and listened and coded qualitative data and came back with recommendations and met with teachers. None of that is really represented in here.
Sure.
And it's also, it was not really to what you're saying, it was in response to a crisis that had already emerged, right? So how do we build it in more preventatively?
Yeah.
I think that,
Some of that.
I think that that begs some reflection on our part.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Caitlyn?
Just one more, sorry. It's an important topic. So when I go through the report and I see all of this stuff that's funded by ESSER, I get nervous.
Yeah.
Because it's like, oh my gosh, how do we make sure that we're getting the intended result? And having a way to be checking in on it often to make sure, because once ESSER money's gone, what are we gonna do, right? And so I know I've kind of harped on the past about having, you know, criterion that we use to know that we are succeeding and doing what we want to, you know, do and that we're being successful. This may be another area that we really need to focus on if we haven't already. And what is success, right? You know, we're spending this money, what is our anticipated outcome or hope, right? And are we on track to getting what we thought we're hoping for?
And when we have invested, which of these investments do we intend to sustain after the grants run dry?
Sure.
Right? So some of these are intentionally short bursts of investment to get our feet back under us. And some of them really, I mean, do we really expect that we won't need interventionists at the high school in the future? Or do we mean to sustain those in our local budget?
Right.
And so those are some of the hard questions that we'll have to grapple with. So, I mean, you can see on here really the extent to which we are formally assessing this plan. And you've heard me say, I think we really need to invest in a data system so it's easier to do the level of analysis that you're asking us to do. I just encourage you to keep asking that question and pushing that because it'll push our thinking.
Yeah. And besides the data though, you have to, before the data, you have to have a clear thought of, well, what do I want to see? What am I hoping for? And then the data is used to show that yes or no, we're on track.
Right. So I think that, I mean, what the Agency of Education requires us to produce is a theory of action. We think that if we do this, then we will get this. And I think that if you were to read that column in there, that would be where you could say, you know, Caitlyn, if you really thought about it this way, you could codify your thinking a little bit more. I would welcome that feedback. That'd be great.
Chip.
I just had a comment generally. There's a lot in that report. I did skim it. I chatted with Caitlyn earlier and said, so who wrote this whole report? And she said, I did. And I have to, school systems get sort of blasted always for having too many administrators and whatever. But, there's a lot that administration has to do, not to just walk the halls and hire and fire people and all that, they gotta write these giant reports. And that's a lot of hours and work, and we can argue about what's in it and what's not in it, and our goals, and those are all perfectly good questions, but, you know, we congratulate our administrators for doing a good job, albeit we have to do this, but I think they're doing a good job as best we can to look at it, and what we have to do according to, like Barb's thing, are we spending it correctly, and is our plan going to be viable? And so, thank you.
Thanks, Jen. All right. Caitlin, do you have more?
I have no more.
You have no more? Excellent. We'll move on. To report of the board. First up is Logan. Just to give us a heads up on a document that we looked at last year around this time and are going to need to look at again.
Perfect. Yes, this is the financial withdrawal agreement between ACSD and Ripton School District. I think it might have been at my first board meeting. I presented on this when it got initially signed back August of last year. It's just a basic breakdown of, hey, when Ripton leaves, they take their building with them. They take over the bond payments on their solar panels. They take over their photocopier lease. Any rights of theirs, any obligations of theirs stay with them. ACSD stay with us. There's also an important note at the end of anything that the agreement didn't think of, if you will, anything that was unaddressed, we'll also treat fairly, right? Well, kind of a catch-all at the end. Since that agreement was put in place, Ripton's withdrawal date has been pushed back a year. So this agreement will need to get amended to reflect that later withdrawal date. The reason this is a discussion item at this point as opposed to an action item is the agreement hasn't been updated with that new date. I'm waiting to hear back from the lawyer, and certainly Ripton's lawyer, I presume, will also be taking a look. And once all the heads are together and the parties are back together, the agreement will be updated. I have no reason to believe why it won't get updated or be in front of the board as an action item at board meeting in August.
So keep that on your radar. It presumably will be in the August 8th board pack to review and then take action on.
And just
Any other questions?
Well, just to add to that, I presume, we should probably have the record reflect Ripton's intended
Oh, yes.
withdraw or, operational date. I believe their board had voted to become operational July 1st of 2023, correct?
Correct.
Right. Yes, they had the option to either do 2020, stick with 2023 or move it to 2024, and they stuck with 2023. Yes. Right.
Yes.
And which also has led to a delay in this process, because before we went and amended the document, we said, well, you guys are going to be voting about this soon. Let's wait till that happens. Yeah. And then we got the clarification, and now it's, now we know what we need to do, and it's just a matter of getting it done.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions for Logan on that? Nope. All right, on to, back to Logan on tax anticipation note that we will take action.
Okay. So annually, we get a tax anticipation note, basically a line of credit from the bank. We use National Bank of Middlebury for it. It's a line of credit. It's basically to help with our cash flow. At times of year, of course, our cash flow our cash flow is not necessarily steady, right? There are times of the year where we're rather light on cash, and we need to keep paying our bills, of course. So this is a very basic tool to make sure we don't run out of money, if you will. What I provided to the bank was a rather simple analysis of monthly expenditures, I shouldn't say expenditures and revenues, I should say cash in and cash out, what we anticipate our lowest cash level to be, basically our most negative that we would be during the next 12 months, and get a line of credit matching that largest negative amount. That came out to, what does it say on here? A little over $3 million, $3.376 million. And the line of credit reflects that. And I guess, yeah, it's a board action. Well, I shouldn't speak out of turn. If the line of credit gets actually, if the board's okay with it, right? The secretary, the treasurer, the board chair sign the various documents included with this line of credit to make it so we have a line of credit, a tax anticipation note line of credit for FY23.
Question.
Yes.
Is there normally a percent paid to the bank for that?
Yes, if we actually dip into the line of credit, which as a disclaimer, I know for the last year, I think for at least the last 2 years, we haven't used it.
Basically, the question was, is there a percentage that we would owe? And secondarily, has it increased?
Yes.
That's what I want to know.
Right.
How much of an increase?
Rightfully so, interest rates are higher, and so the interest rate on the line of credit is higher. 2.25%.
Versus what?
The previous year, actually, I think I do have it right here. It's right on this page, 1.1%.
Do you feel that the increase is acceptable?
Yes. That is reflective of the current market, if you will.
And just for those watching or who watch the recording, this is we've done every year. This is something that we do every year. It's sort of, and I believe other school districts also do this. It's sort of in the normal course of business.
And this may go without saying, we're only paying that interest, of course, while we've taken money off the line of credit. We may loan $1 million from the line of credit for a week, and we're paying the interest rate on that 1 week of course.
Right. Okay, so can I get a motion to approve the resolution as stated in board doc?
I'll make a motion to approve as stated by Logan in the resolution.
I'll second.
A second.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on the resolution for Logan? No. Okay, so all those in favor of approving the resolution as stated, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Oh, any abstentions? Great, the resolution is approved. Thank you very much. All right, next up, Bruce, facility upgrades for security cameras, etc.
Great. I'm actually going to have Will give you a little background on our camera system,
Okay.
and I'm going to pull up a slideshow that I have. So, Will, if you
My audio okay, everybody?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. So I'm sorry I can't be here tonight, just recovering from COVID. But Bruce and I have been working on this security camera project for quite some time. So what I'm going to do is give you kind of a update on what we currently have and a brief history of kind of how we got to where we're at. And that will lead into Bruce's presentation about what we would like to do as we move forward. So the security cameras in the school district go back to about 2005, roughly. That was, it was started at the high school. Bruce put the original ones in by himself. I think they were primarily focused on the parking areas outside. Bruce might be able to enlighten me on that, but I think at that point, that was kind of where we were having the most concern at the high school. Around 2013, they were put in at the middle school. And I think that was at the time that we also upgraded the system at the high school. So we were running the same systems in both places. And as I talk here, just keep in mind that kind of the central theme here is a locally hosted camera system versus a cloud-based camera system. So these first systems that we put in were locally hosted, and by that I mean that we had recording servers in each facility. And these are just fancy computers that have the ability to record video footage from multiple cameras simultaneously. Obviously, it takes a pretty good computer to do that. And over time, both schools have added more cameras. So, the load on these recording servers has increased. About 5 years ago, when I started, I kind of took over the maintenance and management of camera systems. We had a local company install a new recording server at the high school. The old one had failed, and it was a bid situation. This local company was able to put the cameras in and kind of get the server in place. They didn't really know how to do the fine tuning of the configuring. And there's an awful lot involved with that. You have countless properties on each individual camera that need to be configured. They operate based on motion detection, but things like resolution, bit rate, frame rate, these are all separate properties that need to be configured to make these things work well. I didn't have really any experience with security cameras. I kind of had to teach myself to do it. It took me several months to get to high school tuned up to where it was functional. It didn't take long really to realize that we didn't really have the right equipment in place either. Not only did we have multiple generations of cameras at that point, some of which had failed and we have not been able to replace, but the local company that provided us with the server didn't sell us the proper server. And so it really didn't have the capacity to do all of this recording in a way that made it useful. Ideally, what we wanted to be able to do, like if we had an active shooter in the building, for example, we would like to be able to look at the camera system follow around the building. And it really hasn't proven to be reliable enough or robust enough to make that work. About 3 years ago at the middle school, the server failed there. And at that point we knew that if we were going to replace it with one, it was going to be a pretty expensive project. And we were hesitant to do it because new technology has come along that just didn't seem like a good investment to continue investing in a locally hosted server where we have to maintain, we have to monitor, to make sure that it's running all of the time. So we built our own. My department had a spare server that we weren't using. We were able to make that work at the middle school. It's still in place to this day. The elementary schools didn't have cameras up until a couple of years ago when we were starting to do more school shooting incidents. There was almost one in Fairhaven, which kind of prompted districts in Vermont to act to put camera systems in. There was a grant involved with it, and Bruce and I worked with a company called Royal Group, which does a lot of our door lock systems. And we were able to put systems in each elementary school. These are all still locally hosted systems. And the server platform we use is from a company called Milestone. So we actually have Milestone servers in every building at this point. In the elementary schools, these are small systems though, because schools like Ripton have 4 cameras, whereas MUHS has 80 cameras, and middle school is 40 to 50, I think. So we do have newer systems in the elementary schools, and they frankly don't get used as much there. There's just not as many incidents for administration to look at on the cameras. But at the high school and the middle school, as you can imagine, they're needed quite often. And we've had countless problems with what we currently have in place, whether it's camera failure or the servers just not being super reliable. And it seems that every time we really need to dig up some footage on something, we need, we start looking at the recordings that it saves, and maybe the motion detection didn't work properly, or the video footage is really choppy and it's just not usable. And at times, we'll just discover that a camera was offline, maybe it's been offline for quite some time. And it's really too difficult to kind of keep up with monitoring these things on a daily basis. So the school district over the last, say, 10 years has moved to cloud-hosted and web-based services for just about everything. When I set up a new computer these days, there's not much for software that I install on it that lives locally on that computer, because everything we're doing is done over the internet now. Whether it's PowerSchool, Caitlyn was talking about some sort of database program for the various things that we're trying to collect data on. This is all done on the internet now, and the technology has improved so much that in camera systems, that's where the best solution is now as well. We have, 15 years ago, we didn't have proper bandwidth even for internet to be able to do this kind of thing, but now we have super high-speed connections, and cost-wise, it makes a lot of sense to look at web-based cloud services for security cameras. So we have been testing a particular product for a while, and we've had really good luck with it. We're really happy with it. And so I'm sure I forgot something there in my narrative, but you can ask me questions if you have any afterward. And Bruce is going to talk about what we're looking at now.
Great, thank you.
Slideshow.
Not sure, it's not sure. I'm just gonna. Okay. So the product that we're looking at, it's a company called Vrcata, and it is a cloud-based system. They offer more than cameras, but particularly we're interested in the cameras at this point. I have had it installed at Shoreham School for a year. We installed it last summer. It has worked pretty much flawlessly. When there's a power outage, I get an email that the system's offline. If one camera goes out, it needs to be that camera is out. Solves a lot of the chasing to find out, usually after the fact, that something wasn't recorded. So this will help a great deal as far as administration goes. And I had both principals from high school and elementary said they'd be willing to talk to any of you about how useful the system is when it works. So, and I'm sure that if we want to have Mike Lennox come in, he could tell you the difference between the two, because he's experienced both systems. So some of our challenges, our current system is outdated. It takes a lot of time to maintain it. Just as Will said, it's unpredictable. And we've had problems with it. So some of the reasons to make the change are the storage capacity. We not too long ago one of our policies, I believe, said we need to keep 30 days of video storage. And frankly, the milestone systems we have now don't have confidence that can be done. And whereas this system, we don't have to provide all the storage and the servers. The company Vrcata has redundant servers and storage and guarantee that your data is there. It's encrypted. They meet all of our criteria for offsite data storage. Going to this, the cameras themselves record footage and then upload it at night when students aren't online, so it doesn't slow down our bandwidth. So it's got a very easy to use dashboard, which is a web browser based. It's very easy for us to control who has access to it and the level of access, which is right now with our current system, if if I have the system's up all the time in the high school in the closet behind the receptionist, and so anybody who walks in that space has access to that system, and so it's a bit of a concern. At least it has been for our tech department. So it's scalable. It's easy to add to. It just works with Ethernet cables, power over Ethernet, and then it connects. If you plug it in, it'll automatically connect up to the dashboard that's online. And then along with what we're asking for, we've asked for sensors to be placed in restrooms that will alert you if there's vaping. So that's another feature, and we can set it up so it'll send a email or text message to whoever we designate. If we want it to be the principal of the school, so he knows when that happens, it can be. They also offer door access, which we might look at in the future, but right now we're pretty happy with the door access that we're using, and it seems to be meeting our needs. So here's some other schools and colleges that already have this system in place, and you can see there are half a dozen, there's 5 Vermont schools there, several New Hampshire schools, some colleges you might recognize. I've actually spoken to facilities folks at both Essex and Champlain Valley, and they've been very happy with their setups, and they're much larger than what we are. So let's see. So it's not as relevant now, but when I first started talking to them and we were talking about contact tracing, and this really is so user-friendly and intuitive. It's not hard to follow a person from when they enter the building and where they go, and it gives us that fluidity that we don't have now. Often, somebody will blip out of existence while you're watching the video because it dropped a data packet or something when it was recording onto the local server. And that doesn't happen with this system because it records it on the camera and then uploads it. So, yes.
Question. So if it uploads the data at night, right? Your dashboard, is it getting the information directly from the cameras then during the day if you want near real-time access?
Yes, if you pull it up during the day, it will stream the data from that device. But in order to free up your bandwidth, it staggers uploads throughout the evening, and we can designate what hours. If we were a business that we were busy, from 3 till 10 at night, then you would want to use that time. So you can choose what hours it uploads, and you can stagger it and say, I only want a third of it to upload at this time. So you have that flexibility. Yes.
How many days can you keep the information that's provided?
So the camera itself will store 30 days worth of information on the device. However, it uploads every night, so it's cleans out its memory. Yep.
If you had a situation, God forbid, during the day where you wanted, and you explained like or I think Will was talking about following an active shooter around, would it be able to do that by pulling it from the cameras and not having access to the cloud?
Well, you'll need to access it through the dashboard
Right.
in order to see the cameras and follow it. What you can do is it offers the administrators of the system the ability to give temporary access to even a cell phone. So if you had a responding person you wanted to share that live view with, you could basically text message them access. So.
And do all of our schools, so you're thinking about this system throughout all the schools?
Eventually. This is specifically to start at the high school and middle school.
Okay.
Because we have the oldest systems in these two buildings. As Will mentioned previously, we received grant funds to put camera systems in all the elementary schools, which we did, I believe, a year before the pandemic.
Yeah.
So they still have a little bit of useful life in them.
Yeah.
However, they still have the same problems that we discussed.
Yeah.
With the exception of Shoreham, who we treated as like a test subject, because frankly, Mike Lennox used the system a fair amount and found it very frustrating with what he had. I don't think, there's some elementary schools that haven't accessed their camera system in months. And, often when they do want to, they'll call Will and he'll say, oh, well, it's been offline. I don't know how long it's been offline. So.
Shoreham keeps theirs.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yep, Shoreham, Mike, and it may be different with the new principal, but Mike used it a fair amount. It's useful in figuring out, interactions in the hallway, or eliminates a lot of, I did that, I didn't do that, and say, well, okay, let me show you this, which is very helpful.
Bruce,
Yes.
we do have a student data privacy agreement with Vrcata as well.
Yes, and that may be useful for people to know. So,
Yes.
Yep, they will not share our data. Just a little bit on the equipment. So this is their products. The cameras themselves are warranted for 10 years. We can have as many users as we want to allow. Unlimited cloud archiving for video. We do have to pick a level of, how much storage, because obviously if we want to store it indefinitely, they would want us to pay for that. And so we picked the 30-day storage level, because that's what we've got in our policy. And you can do it for more if you want. They will automatically download all the firmware updates to the hardware. They monitor it. If we have a camera that fails, they will ship us one next day air, and we just ship back the one that failed. All part of our agreement. And we would need we have there's two pieces to it. There's the hardware and the three pieces actually, the hardware, software, and a license agreement. So just like you want your, Microsoft Office to keep working for you so you can access all your old documents, it's kind of, if we want to access all the video footage, we have to keep a current license. So that's really the end of that. So I'm going to close this out.
And what is you have to renew the license yearly, or?
So you can choose the level. Yearly is the most expensive. 5-year is the least expensive for licensing. Let me see.
And how much is?
And so I want to see if I can close my slideshow now.
Press escape.
Escape. Sorry, I'm just not well versed in this.
Boy,
No.
I don't know why escape isn't working for you.
Yeah, it doesn't like me tonight. So
You just hit escape on your keyboard, Bruce.
He
yeah,
was hitting
I
it.
did. It's not functioning. So, well, I can probably go back here and unshare, can I? Let's see.
Probably hovering at the top of the screen.
Oh,
Bring your
up,
cursor
up
up.
here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not having much
Wow.
luck.
Try hitting escape again. Yeah.
Ah, there we go. Yay. Okay.
Well done.
Now let's move you back. Okay, we can do that. I'm almost there. So, go back to Zoom. All right. Well, you don't need to watch me fumble with this. So,
Zoom on the bottom.
So,
all right. So what we're asking for, and now I'll ask Logan to intervene. We have some reserve funds that we would like to use for the installation and the license agreement, and our plan is to finance the equipment part for 5 years, and the equipment's good for 10 years. So we would do a 5-year agreement to finance the equipment, pay for the licensing and installation up front, and so in 5 years we'll need to renew the license, but the major expense will be out of the way. So
And Logan's gonna let us know what the numbers look like.
he's got the figures, right?
Yeah, well, you'd asked about how much does the licensing cost, right? So 5 years of licensing is about $140,000 for all the cameras, for the 2 buildings together. Another roughly $50,000 is the installation, which is where this number comes in the memo of roughly $190,000 to cover the license, the 5 years of licensing and the installation of the cameras.
So the 50 is the purchasing the actual cameras and then installing them?
Just installing them. The actual purchase price of the cameras, the plan is to pay that out of operating funds over a 5-year period. Basically, pay the cost of the cameras themselves over the next 5 years.
So the cost of the cameras themselves over the 5 years is how much?
If we bought them all, it would be $230,000. By paying them over a 5-year period, it's about $250,000.
Okay.
So then it would be $50,000 per year out of operating funds, right?
5 years.
So it adds about 10% to the cost.
And I assume Peter has.
Yep, Peter was involved in the conversation. We have his
Love
blessing.
to know what he thought of
I have
Until he was gone.
that works. I believe his exact words in the email back to us were, that works, please. Sorry.
Yeah, looks like Lindsay has a question too.
Okay, Jen first and Sally first.
Could you tell me your logic of financing the cameras and paying proactively 5 years of the licensing agreement? Why don't we pay only 1 year of licensing agreement since we're not financing the licensing agreement and then pay more for the cameras initially?
Okay, so the difference in licensing so it's about 70% of the cost to license for 1 year as it would be for 5.
So it's less expensive if we
If
commit to more years, you're saying?
Yes, much less expensive.
Okay.
Yes.
Lindsay, did you have a question?
I do. We've been presented with one option. Was this a competitive process? I would be interested in seeing what other options are, considering this is such an expensive thing that we're putting money into, and this sort of technology becomes obsolete so quickly. And do you have, like any data that you could show some of the other companies that you've looked at and prices and how it compares to the one that is your favorite? I've gone through this with employers before, and sometimes some of the finer points were missed in the sales pitch, and there ends up being a lot of wasted staff hours spent with the whole transition or fine print.
Okay, well, I've looked at a couple other systems. And so like the Career Center uses a completely different system than we use. And I felt that their functionality was limited compared to what this offers. There's also another company that I researched online. I didn't get their product here. They didn't have a distributor in this area. And frankly, that's one of the big things is finding an authorized distributor in our area for some of these is difficult. Most of them, the closest one is Massachusetts. So I don't have, a spreadsheet for you to compare costs. And certainly, if we were to do a competitive bid, I'd want to do it for this system. And not necessarily, I think it gets too muddied if you open it up to, 5 different systems, because they have different features and different, different operating systems. So certainly we can, go to bid for this system through multiple vendors that are authorized to do it. But I would be hesitant to just say, I want to look at all the camera systems out there. There's a lot of them with claims of being the best. And after using this one for a year in Shoreham, I really feel this is the right choice. So.
Have we talked to other districts of similar size to get recommendations? And, when we talk about functionality, that's something that I don't recall really coming up with a board of like, what level of functionality do we want to have the capability to track an active shooter? The cost of that is dramatically higher than just having, than not having that. Or do we want,
Yeah.
who's been involved in the conversation to decide what features, because that drives the price for things like this.
That's been, go ahead if you, okay. That's really been driven by administrators and speaking with them and what they need for their day-to-day use. It's not really driven by an active shooter scenario. It's how they use it on a daily basis to, figure out who punched a hole in the wall, or, bring up a fight that happened between a couple of students to try and observe what happened. So when it comes to that, they really are struggling with the system we have, because it's hit or miss whether or not it catches the incident, or if the frame freezes right at a crucial moment. So that we have not experienced with this other system. And as short-staffed as we've been, this has become more of a vital tool. We have fewer people able to be in the hallway to observe what's going on, because we don't even have teachers in the classroom. So somebody else who might have been in the hallway is now covering a class. So this is really an important tool for administrators.
And so we're replacing like human beings with the having cameras around, and we're spending this amount of money to be able to figure out how to proceed with disciplinary action versus safety. And I feel like this we might want to have a little bit more discussion about the purpose of this, and
I'm not sure that this is
spending this amount of money to figure out who did what and what, when an event happens.
right. I think Lindsay, my perspective would be that this is a request from our administrators as a tool that they need and want in the daily operation of their school buildings. I'm not sure it's the board's role to then question that's the, sort of what our philosophy is around cameras. I mean, we're hearing from Bruce that it's worked in Shoreham, that this system's worked well in Shoreham, and that he and Peter and Will have worked with administrators in the buildings, that this is something that they need and want. Right?
I do think that the board should be part of the dialogue. I think this is like a pretty major philosophical thing, you know, to have you monitor the purpose of the cameras and, you know, it's a.
Right, it's something that we've been doing for a long time.
Administrators decide that they want to be, you know, filling the school with security cameras and what, you know, I have a son in the school and like, you know, knowing that he's like walking, I don't know, it's, this is a big philosophical discussion in schools around the country and businesses around the country. It's not just like, I don't know, to me, it's kind of a big deal. It's a philosophical question that affects every student and staff person in our district.
Yep.
Not
Okay,
just the administrators.
I would say one, we've been doing this, but first I see Steve, and then I see Jen, and then I see Mary Heather and Brian. So let's start with Steve.
Okay, so I have a question and then I would like to comment as well. The cameras, are they audio as well as video? Or are we just seeing video?
They have the capacity for audio.
Okay. My second comment is in support of Lindsay. I absolutely do not support having cameras in the school, let alone for $500,000. There are so many privacy issues in here. You're putting cameras in bathrooms and you're saying that it's not up to the board to say anything about this, that the administrators are asking for it. I strongly object. I will not be voting to pass this, and until we have a conversation about what's going on about these cameras, I can't support anything like this. So
Okay, I
that's
think
my
just
comment.
there are no cameras in the bathrooms. There are sensors for vape. So if someone is vaping, like a smoke detector, it can sense the vape and send a message that there is vape detected in the bathroom. But am I correct?
You
That
are
there
correct.
are no
No
cameras in the
bathrooms.
bathrooms?
Only in public spaces.
Jen?
Yeah, so just to clarify too, like where the camera policy, was it about a year ago that we talked about, we had like the policy, and that's where you were referring to having, you know, storing for 30 days. So we've always had cameras in our buildings and it's for safety. It's not for spying, it's for safety. And I think what we're being presented with isn't a request to put cameras in the school. It's that our system right now is failing and it's not working as intended, so that when there is a problem that they're trying to look into, the data isn't there. And so I think we're just trying to use efficiently and to live up to what the board has dictated, that we need to have the recordings for 30 days and they're not actually able to do that, is my understanding. So they're trying to act out the board's policy in a way with equipment that works. So I that's my understanding of what we're talking about here today. And so I feel like school safety is our #1 priority, and that's, if this is the tool, a tool to be able to achieve that, then I think we should support it.
Yeah, I would just echo what Jen just said. My understanding is we already had a conversation as a board about the use of cameras in school. There is a policy, I believe, that we voted on.
Yep.
And this is just in support of carrying out that policy that we already agreed to with functional equipment. So I guess I fail to see this as a controversial matter. I think this is just doing what we said what we were going to do.
Right. Is there the possibility of getting any federal or state grants for this?
I haven't found any federal grants for this. We may be able to get a small amount of grant money through our insurance company for this. Yeah.
It's worth looking at.
Yes, we will explore those.
Chip?
I agree with Jen on this issue. The privacy issue is, yes, always in our minds, but you know, we're surveyed everywhere we go. Every store, we're surveyed all over the place. We're surveyed at traffic lights, we're surveyed everywhere. So you're surveyed on your cell phone every minute. So, you know, I think we can argue this point till we're blue in the face, but I just don't see how we can get around. If we don't get around the point of using something that may be a tool, not just in an active shooter, but in other situations. I think the privacy issue does come up, but I just don't think we're gonna come to resolution as to how we deal with it. And I'd much rather have a good system that is predictable, works, and, we're committed. I also think that having it in 3 of the largest schools in this state, in Champlain, Essex, and Mount Mansfield, is a good vetting. We checked with them, or at least some of them, and they like the system. Say that's okay with me, rather than trying to find and piecemealing it through other vendors that may be cheaper and may not do what we want. Thank you.
Yes, yeah, it was F-26, and it does talk about the general principle and that students would be notified once a year and faculty that there are cameras involved. I guess my question is more of a procurement question, and I don't know the answer. What is our policy for when you have to go out for bid? What's the dollar amount, right?
Right. Yeah, so if we're making a one-time purchase, then anything over $40,000 will need to go to bid.
Right.
Yep, so I'm prepared to send out a bid request for a Vrcata system. So I get a quote from multiple dealers that, sold this equipment.
Right. And to your knowledge, are there multiple dealers within our region?
Within New England, there are.
Yeah, which is very good.
And so this one was, where did you say this one was located?
So this quote is from a company based out of Rutland. So they're the closest dealer, but there's another dealer in Lowell, Mass. There's a dealer in Albany.
Right.
Yeah.
And can you speak to sort of what you and Will were thinking in terms of time, how time sensitive this is? Is this something that you're hoping to get in for September, and how long does installation? I'm thinking if we were to postpone this till our next, to approve at our next meeting, would that still allow time for?
That would push it into the school year. I'd rather not be changing devices while students are here. Yeah.
Because so much of the cost is really licensing fees, there may be some differences that you would get in a bid process. The physical cameras is a different bill, right? So this is really the right to use and any kind of services associated with that. So there could be differences in bids.
But wouldn't the licensing come from?
Yeah, the licensing, I think, will be the same.
Will be the
Because
same.
that's published on the website.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the licensing is, it's really the installation.
Do they give in their services
and-
support?
Well, it's not their services. It'll be the differences that'll come in bids will be installation, and possibly if the vendor does a certain volume, they might get a discount from the manufacturer. So.
So the installation, remind me, is what piece of this?
So that's in what we'd like to pay up front, installation and licensing. And then we just wanted to finance the equipment. And those were 3 figures we could break out fairly easily, rather than just saying, here's the total bill. We want to, pay this amount of money that we have.
So if you're asking for the figure, so what Logan had said was $140,000 for the 5-year licensing, approximately $50,000 for the installation of equipment. That's how it breaks out.
So if we're thinking, if the board decides that we need to see multiple bids, really what we're asking for is there a savings on the 50,000? Is that where you would imagine
that's where the real difference would be.
It's not gonna be in the total.
Right, and my gut reaction is the local guy is going to easily outdo somebody from out of state, just because you have to have a crew come and stay here, and but certainly we'll go through the bid process to meet requirements.
So, I mean, my instinct is to move on this and to vote on it. It sounds like you've done the homework, even though there wasn't a bid process, but that in reality, the bid process probably wouldn't get us anything much different than what we already have. Is that your expert opinion?
Yes.
Okay, so I think we should get a motion on the table. Jen, do you wanna?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve the use of $189,189 from the Capital Reserve Fund for installation and licensing of cameras and environmental sensors at MUHS and MUMS.
Thank you. May I have a second?
Correct.
All right, so we have a motion on the table. Are there questions or comments regarding that motion? Barb?
Could we maybe just say not to exceed this amount? Because then and then still do the bid? You know, we could approve
That amount. and
that
then if there
amount
was
not
a
to
bid-
exceed, right?
Mhm.
But then also, you know, see if we can do better, or there might be some volume discount, you know, size discount.
Right, I mean, I think we can still use the whole $189,189 though, because we can just put a little bit toward the cameras instead of taking the whole loan out. So I think we can still use the whole fund for this purchase, knowing that we're not going to be paying for
Right,
everything.
with the caveat that Bruce maybe digs a little bit to see if there's some bulk discount.
And that the surplus would go towards the cameras.
Right.
Yeah.
But I think we have to specify that.
I'm happy to make a suggestion, and it would sound similar to what we did with the high school gym. We would add the words up to the motion, so it'd be approved use of up to 189,000, is that what you're saying?
That's what, yeah.
I don't see any problem with that.
Yep.
Yeah, I
And
mean,
then if
I would
there's
just,
savings.
I would like to just use that money toward this project though. I don't wanna, like, if there's
Right.
10,000 that you find that you can hold on to, I'd rather use
Put it
that
towards the
and put
cameras.
it toward the cameras and not take out as much of a loan.
Right.
Finance less.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. That's a
That
good
makes
idea.
sense.
So I don't know if we have to-
With the total.
Yeah.
With the understanding that if there's savings found, that savings goes towards offsetting the 5-year financing.
I mean, it's called installation and licensing, but installation involves buying the cameras technically, right?
Right.
Is it enough just to have that recorded in the minutes, or do we have to change the motion a little bit?
I think when I write the motion in the minutes, I think that should suffice,
Okay.
right?
And the fact that if there is surplus, that it would just go towards the cameras, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Which I
just
think falls under
technicality,
installation of the
legal.
cameras.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, great.
Any other questions or comments? All right, so all those in favor of the motion as stated so eloquently by Jennifer,
As written by Logan.
please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
No.
Any abstentions?
Oh, did Lizzie fall off the call or something? There's a Q&A. I wonder if she-
Lizzie's just calling on
Okay.
my phone.
Oh, okay, she's probably.
Hello? Yeah. She's not able to reconnect.
Okay.
Does she want to
Does
vote?
she wanna
Ask
vote?
her about voting.
Yeah, so when did you get kicked off? Did you hear the motion? And so, and you wanted to, she wanted to do some discussion. She had raised her hand.
Oh, looks like she's back.
Oh,
Oh, no,
Oh,
wait,
there she is.
he needs to move you over.
hit more, Bruce hit more.
Okay.
Yeah, he's gonna
And
move
then
you over.
promote to panelist.
Okay.
Wait, it just popped back up again.
There you are.
Oh, okay.
All right,
Great.
Okay. I have no idea what happened.
Okay. So I guess we'll back up just a moment. We have a motion on the table and we were voting, but we lost your connection. So did you have discussion that you had a question about? Or are you ready?
I'm wondering, I have a question. What about all of the other schools in the district?
So this motion just pertains to the high school and the middle school. Did you hear, can you hear us?
She looks frozen.
She does look frozen. Maybe turn your video off and see if you can just hear us. Well, this is, not sure what we do in this situation.
Or do you mind trying to call her there? Audio or- Thank you.
Hey, you froze on the screen.
So Lindsay, we're in the middle, okay, so we're in discussion.
There it goes again, coming up again.
Okay, let's just do this by phone so we can keep the meeting going. So your question was regarding the other schools in the district, and my response was that this motion that's on the table is just for the middle school and the high school.
Okay, so we're not in any way including the other schools in the bigger picture?
Nope, not at this time.
And to clarify, there are already cameras in those schools on different servers. Bruce was
Right.
alluding to those earlier in the presentation.
Right, those systems were installed pre-pandemic, just before the pandemic, so it's Will and Bruce's expert opinion that they will last, that at this time, it's not needed to replace them.
Can I ask a question, actually? There's a person in Shoreham who actually inspects schools and all that kind of stuff. And there is grant money available, especially with the uptick in school shootings. So possibly we do need to investigate whether or not we can offset some of the cost with grant money.
Is that something Logan would do, or, I mean, exactly like?
I mean, I think we
Who does
can
that?
approve the motion, and then if other funding
Right, and
avenues
Take
become
them back.
available, then our administrators would rather use other people's money than our own.
absolutely,
They have that.
yeah. I'm not trying to be difficult, but I think to do our due diligence, if, we can get half of it paid for, or even
Absolutely.
25% paid for, it would make sense. And, he mentions SVPP or STOP. Maybe we'll have him send you a text.
Give them my information.
Yeah, we'll have him,
I'm happy
yes,
to talk.
yes, okay, sounds good,
Great,
thank you.
okay, so is Lindsay, why don't you turn that phone off, just so we're not
Is it
double,
the one that says that she?
because Lindsay's here.
I'll back up.
I'm here again, I don't know why I keep getting kicked out.
Let's complete the vote, Madam
So
Chair.
we're gonna bring this to vote again. So all those in favor of the motion on the table as presented by Jennifer, please say aye.
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 Are there any opposed?
Oh,
Steve and Lindsay, thank you. And any abstentions? Okay. So the motion passes. Thank you. And we will look forward to hearing just further discovery on your part.
Thank you.
I'm gonna bounce it back to Caitlyn, in lieu of policy committee folks, right? To talk about the adopting D22.
Great, thank you. So we've talked about D22 a couple of times in the policy committee and at least once here. This is a policy for the selection of library materials. We don't have one currently in our list of approved policies. This is recently, the one being put forward for adoption today is the Vsba model with our district information in it. The Vsba model is informed through advocacy of Vermont librarians, and some of our librarians, including Stephanie Sherman and Megan Sutton, have been involved in that work extensively through this year and really advocating for us having this policy in place. It is both to promote best practice in selection of library materials. It's very well vetted, and it's also a protective factor for us. So as analysis of and public discourse around curriculum materials and texts becomes more challenging, having really concrete policies and procedures in place is a way to just guarantee that we are doing our best work as professional educators, and that there are formal channels for calling into question when there are questions raised about the materials that we use. So this is the policy that the policy committee has put forward to us. I'm happy to answer any questions about it. And it really comes with a ream of procedures that we have in draft form to be fully vetted by our librarians in partnership with our administrators.
Right.
Does it include the parental input?
So the parental input, it's not noted. The only place that the policy mentions parental input is at the bottom, where, let me find it, on the 4th page, I think it is, use of school library materials and resources. It says the library media specialist may consult with faculty, the student body, community members, and organizations to develop library collections that are diverse, inclusive, and representative of history, contributions, and perspectives of ethnic groups and social groups. So that is a nod to some stakeholder engagement.
It's a maybe, and that's my concern. I would much rather see it integrated into the policy, that parents have an input into what is on those shelves and their students can read. And secondarily, I would like to see, I don't like the fact that maybe one person would be selecting or choosing what would be on those shelves. I think that there has to be an overview by somebody else or some group as to what's going on, because any particular librarian can be very biased, and I don't want to see that. So there are 2 points that I would indicate at this point, unless they were incorporated, I would vote against them.
I think some of the inclusion of parental input, that's part of the procedure, which I'm sure is what you're.
Yep, so the procedures as currently drafted, not yet adopted, really emphasize that that the authority and responsibility for selection lies on our licensed library personnel. So it really does lean on educators and specifically professional librarians to be the people who carry that responsibility and authority. However, there are a lot of parameters for the criteria that they need to consider to guide those selections. And there are very thoughtful, let me find it, the procedure for reconsideration of instructional materials, which invites critique from community members, parents alike, and professional educators to call into question something that's selected. And also, again, these are draft procedures, not adopted yet, but as drafted by the librarians. And they specifically say, in terms of the step for reconsideration, upon the receipt of a request for reconsideration of library and instructional materials form, so there's a drafted form that would formalize that process, the principal will convene a committee of at least 5 to consider the complaint. The committee will consist of the principal, the librarian, a teacher, and a parent or community representative. So the idea is that our professional educators select the texts and manage the libraries, but that when it's called into question, when that work is called into question, there's a more representative group, including a parent or community member.
the problems that I would have with that is that it's after the fact,
Mhm.
and it's counter to what we're supposed to be doing, and that is engaging the community. It is, that's all.
Barb?
Yeah, in the policy, it does say there's what the administrative responsibilities are, and it calls out that the superintendent or designee will develop and implement procedures and basically a policy for how you're gonna select the materials.
Mhm.
So, I believe some of what Brian's asking for would really be the policy the procedure as opposed to the policy,
Mhm.
right? But it does in here, it is not just saying that the librarian is gonna select the materials. There is supposed to be a procedure to address how materials will be selected and so on and so forth, which I would imagine would be a visible document, you know.
Yeah, so it should be, that procedure, again, we have draft language that will be decided by our librarians in collaboration with our administrative team. And once those are codified, they would be linked below the policy on the webpage. And that would also be a place for librarians or principals or anybody who receives complaints to direct people to find the information about how do I formalize a complaint if we're not able to resolve it informally.
I would just, I think what's really important about both the policy and the procedure is that the responsibility of selecting materials is done by qualified professionals. I think it is important for parents to have a process by which they can follow to influence decisions that are made or call into question decisions that are made. But I feel very uncomfortable with adding kind of the just a decision-making authority to, you know, sort of the public at large and any mechanism that would, I don't know, eclipse or allow that decision to be subverted by public rather than actual education professionals. I feel like, you know, we as a board, we want to make sure the right folks are making decisions about the materials we're making available to kids in an educational environment. And I just feel like educational professionals and trained librarians are the folks who should be making those choices. So I would support it as written.
Jen?
Yeah, and so I think there may be some room within the procedure that looks like it's, you know, being fleshed out maybe for like suggestions from students or and families. That might be something that could be, maybe we could invite that. And also to clarify, this is a VSBA policy. And so I know, Brian, in the past, I've had like one or two things about a policy we've been adopting that we don't write. We're adopting it from the state level. And when I've had an issue with one or two pieces of it, I'm told it's almost like we can't really tweak the policy from the state level, because then every time there's sort of a new iteration, we have to remember what piece we've tweaked and what piece is their language. And so I think if there's not something that we're objecting to necessarily that's in there that we don't agree with, which is where I've been in the past, but rather something that we'd like to include, I feel like there might be room in that procedure to include a little bit more of that invitation.
I guess what I'm not enjoying is the fact that we're going along with some organizations' recommendations and not putting together our own.
This is the organization that sort of dictates all of the policy in Vermont. So there's some that we have to take from them, and then there's some that we're invited, like recommended policies. And this is a recommended policy?
Yes,
Otherwise we would have had it already, right?
Yep. Then it moved from what's the category below, recommended? For consideration. It was originally one for consideration. It's been moved to recommended policy, so it's.
So what's your suggestion,
So,
given that?
right, so it's a recommended policy by the VSBA who, you know, so that most of our policies are the ones that are mandated by them. We have to do it. So they've vetted it, they've, you know, gone through these things. And like I said, there's one that I don't agree with a piece of it still, that we had to do because it was a mandated one. And I was like, I wish we could rewrite this one piece of it. And got so far as to bother the board with actually seeing how can we actually proceed with asking them and moving them to change that language. With this one, like I said, if there's not something that we're saying we don't agree with in here, but rather we would like maybe a little bit more invitation with, then I think we have room in our policy to do, or our procedures to do that within the
That's my hope.
district.
That'd be my hope. Okay.
Yeah, yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, and it seems like Caitlyn was jotting that down as, to invite some more input from community and parents and
Great, thank you.
families.
Okay, Steve, and then we'll take it to vote.
I think there was a mischaracterization of the VSBA policies. The VSBA does not create the policies. They don't require the policies. What they do is they look at legislation, because only the legislature can require something. And they have a set of lawyers that look at them and say, these policies will keep you in the law. And so required in the sense that that's going to keep us from running afoul of the law. The VSBA does not create that. The legislature does. Recommended policies are more like, we think this is a good idea to have in place because you could run afoul of the law, or this is just a good thing to have to cover you. So the VSBA is not telling us what to do. They're saying if you do this stuff, the recommended or the required policies, then you're not going to run afoul of a lawsuit or anything like that. So I just wanted to clarify that. And the VSBA is working on our behalf. It's not just some random organization out there that's advocating for a particular policy or anything like that. They are looking out for us to make sure that we don't, to protect us from actions that may not be in our best interest. So I just wanted to clarify that. The VSBA is not creating these requirements.
Thank you, Steve. I appreciate your clarification, you're reminding us of that. Much appreciated. Okay, with that, can I have a motion to adopt policy D22?
I make a motion to adopt policy D22 as provided in our board pack materials.
Great, and a second?
Second.
Steve, thank you. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great. D22 passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. This is a policy that we have been understanding the need for quite some time, and I appreciate it. And Brian, I have made note so that when we bring this to the team who will be formalizing the procedure, we'll consider opportunities for input
I
from
appreciate
community
that,
members.
thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I have one other, and that is that I sent the board an email about a request for someone to step up to join the Communications and Engagement Committee. And Mary Gill has done that, and so she will be a new member of the Communications and Engagement Committee. Is there any other?
Yes.
Right.
Any other brother?
Any other?
I have read and heard about either a no-touch law or policy. What is the situation on that? Is it a federal law, a state law, a policy within this district? It's no touch. You don't put your hands on a child.
I am not familiar with that in any way.
Really?
I don't know what you're referring to specifically. I mean, there are certainly rules about physical restraints of students and those types of things, but what's the context of?
Basically, I had read about it, I think, on the internet and some of the magazines that I'm getting, maybe the Wall Street Journal. And it's even talking about not even putting your hand on the student's shoulder. And the ramifications. And I'm saying to myself, if you can't even do that, you just put robots in the school. And that's it. So I'm surprised that nobody has heard about that.
Does the school have a policy about?
So, I mean, it's so different developmentally, right? So you can imagine pre-K versus 10th grade. We interact with students very differently because of what's developmentally appropriate and in different contexts besides just age. So, Brian, if you find something like that and can forward it to us, that might help us
I
with some
will. I
context and we
appreciate
can
that.
answer in a more targeted way.
Yeah, it is interesting, when I've been in the middle school, those students, sometimes they have some strong opinions of what's okay and what's not, and I think, just being near somebody one time, they said, like, don't touch me, and I said, I'm not going to touch you, but like, it was like, you come close to them and they sort of have this like visceral reaction if you're just kind of there, and so I was actually thinking the same thing, like, I wonder how that's, like, I don't know, is there a rule against like, like you're saying, a hand on his shoulder or something, or patting somebody on the back, because students in the middle school seem really in tune to it and have talked about it in that way.
Yeah, and I've encountered the same thing.
Me
when
too.
I've moms,
Yeah.
because I'm a, hand on the arm kind of person.
Yeah.
Me too.
And have had that reaction. And I guess it didn't make me think that there was a policy. It made me think more that this particular student was probably agitated or had, a trauma history.
Yeah.
That I needed to just honor that. So,
Right.
but yeah, it's something I've definitely encountered at moms.
Yeah.
Me too. Okay, our next meeting is August 8th.
Oh, I'm sorry, I do have an other that I just want to bring up.
Other.
Real brief, other. Just a heads up that, I'm gonna be, hosting a virtual office hour.
Right.
This coming Wednesday and the following Wednesday, July 6th, and then again, July 27th. Just commiserate with the release of our facilities report, and just want to give you a heads up. I will be sending to the full board just the links to those, just in case you want to pop in. It's going to be 6 to 7 on those Wednesdays. I'll be hosting it from my home. It's not like an official board meeting, but anyway, you're welcome to pop in. We'll just obviously have to keep in mind if 7 of us show up, we'll have to manage that. But just want to give you a heads up that's happening.
So we got the email invitation.
So that's what that was.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I saw it in your update of what it was. Thank
Yeah,
you.
well, you can't wait to hear. how
Yeah,
that
we'll
goes.
see if people show up.
Yes.
I hope so.
That's great.
So sorry, yeah.
Okay, motion to adjourn.
Can you just clarify on the next meeting piece? So I
Yes,
have them on
I'll
my calendar and like, I don't know if they were auto-fed or if I've just put them on, so we don't have any meetings in
We have
July.
no meetings in
So
July,
I can clear those out. All right.
and so our next official board meeting is the 8th, and then the 22nd of August, and then we have on the September 12th, everyone make sure you have in your calendars, the afternoon, 3 to 8 is a retreat.
I don't think I have that. All right. And the retreat will be here. Is that,
Presumably, unless you hear otherwise.
okay.
Great, so motion to adjourn at 8:45.
I think the motion.
Great, thank you. Second, Brian, great. All those in favor?
Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. Have a happy July. Thank you, fellow Zoom members. Hope to see you in August.
Yeah, hope so.